It may seem like a strange thing to say to start off an essay about film, and an obvious thing to say in general, but writing has become ubiquitous. There isn't a medium that doesn't use writing on some level. Centuries ago, poetry mixed with music to create music as we know it now. Writing evolved into theatre, and a little over 100 years ago, writing made its way into film. Long after the medium of film had evolved into television, a new evolution occurred, one that would be indicative of things to come in following decades. Music video was not a new concept, its creation often attributed to the Beatles in the late 50s, and a few years earlier than that, Tony Bennett for a marketing film for the song Stranger in Paradise.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Founded in 1981 and an instant hit, MTV only truly became a household name in the early 90s.
Check it out.
The evolution of music video is one that could very easily mirror what we see in the future denominations of film as a medium. And here I'll be talking about the areas where I believe we will be seeing this new evolution. Music video was created to fill the need for quickly consumable content people could engage with whilst out on the town or spending time with friends, and also acted brilliantly as a marketing vehicle for new and established musicians. Music video simply and succinctly encapsulates a good microcosm of my overall point, and may be able to help us predict what the next evolution of film and entertainment will be, and why it's film that will be pushing us into the next emergent medium. One that we may already be seeing the beginnings of. Do remember music video though, as we will be coming back to it later. Perhaps this new evolution will be something that meshes two mediums together, like music video, or perhaps it will use the film language to create a new type of experience for viewers. Either way though, the future is exciting. But I do have some idea of what I think this breakthrough medium will look like, taking advantage of the interactivity of modern technology and the tenets of filmmaking to push us forward into a new way to tell stories and engage audiences, as well as creating an accessible community for both creators and consumers. In the noughties, another new medium had a boom in popularity and in economic value: the artistic medium of video games. Now, before I talk about VR, I want to talk about something from video games that will be extremely important in the future, and that is digital spaces. Video game environments are artistic feats, combining the painting of individual textures for everything from the floor to walls to books to tables, chairs, and every other object in the environment, as well as sculpting each object individually. But it's hard to tell stories with environments alone, which is why writing and acting have made the leap into this medium.
Earlier, this brutal killing took place while the family was gathered at home on a Sunday afternoon.
Writing should go without saying, as many AAA video games stand on par with traditional film and their stories, and have for a while. Performances, on the other hand, are much harder to carry over. Voice acting has been a part of video games for decades, with varying results.
You probably shouldn't laugh anymore.
But nothing will ever match the detail and complexity of real human performances. And with modern technology, we can capture those nuances in great detail. This is a clip from a game from 2010, a decade ago.
What have you got?
Looks like a drug overdose.
Get away from him, Phelps. This is my case.
Shut your fucking mouth! Since when does a bagman work a case?
I knew this creep wasn't on the morphine heist. Victim of his own product.
Hey, detective! Can we back it off a notch? This is getting out of hand.
There's a time to talk and a time to shut up. Now is a time to be quiet, son.
Courtney Sheldon was a corpsman, Roy. He served his country. He went out with a medical kit and an Army 45 into places that made the Valley of Death look like a picnic. He was either naive enough or dumb enough to get involved in the Suburban Redevelopment Fund, along with the mayor, the DA, Monroe, and a certain crooked cop. He was involved in the morphine heist, but he has a puncture wound in his jugular, which makes this a murder case. He was a better man than you'll ever know. You say one more word about him and I will blow your fucking head off!
You finally lost it, partner.
Now, this game represents a turning point in a set of technologies taken from film called performance capture. These include various systems to capture body movements and perfectly track each muscle in the face. As I said, these technologies were taken from film, but they were really revolutionized in the space of video games. Modern film examples would be the Marvel movie villain Thanos, or in the Planet of the Apes movies, or most famously for Gollum in The Lord of the Rings. In cinematic film, it's often used to add subtle performances to fantastical characters, with Thanos being a fantastic example. In video games, it's used to bring these same subtleties of performance to a world where the player has full agency, like in the game Senua's Sacrifice.
Senua knows that there's no going back to how things were. That there's nothing to go back to at all.
Stay still, stay quiet, hide, don't tell her.
Their gods can see into your mind. They will use this power to destroy you.
They won't stop me. I can still feel it.
Whatever's left of him, they will never let him go.
I'm not gonna let him rot here!
You're the one rotting here.
Leave me alone.
You will die here.
No!
And all your suffering will have been for nothing!
Shut up!
Now, these two scenes that I've shown you are something used in video games called a cutscene, when all agency is taken away from the player and a cinematic moment is allowed to play out. These require lighting artists, digital camera operators, directors, writers, and of course performers, amongst 100 other roles. Exactly that of a traditional film or television production. In fact, many of the biggest names in video games are people who started out working in film and television.
I started out in film.
In the last decade, the line between video games and film has blurred even further, with studios such as Quantic Dream and Telltale having the majority of player agency, being choosing dialogue options for the main character. This is still typically thought of as a game, whereas over on Netflix they released a slew of interactive films, the most well-known of which being Bandersnatch, where viewer agency allowed them to choose dialogue options for the main character. Sounds familiar. In 2019, several of the games from Telltale's library were added to Netflix using the same software as Bandersnatch. And here we see the problem. There comes a point where the line between these mediums becomes blurred. The other major addition to our lives when it comes to consuming entertainment, or even beyond that, keeping in contact with friends and family, or even learning about things and keeping up with current events and news. Of course, I'm talking about social media. Social media has restructured how we make and advertise film and who we make it for. The availability of media in the social media landscape has made it so that people need quick, satisfying content from reliable sources. It's also created a need for different shapes of film. Aspect ratio is something that any one piece of social media content may need to take into account multiple versions over multiple platforms, leading to platforms like Quibi, which allows much of its content to be watched in either landscape or portrait modes on your phone. But this is not where I think the new creativity is coming from. With all the short video, image, and audio content on social media, I think the most important thing social media allows filmmakers is text. Much of interactive fiction incorporates extra reading content, but there is one emergent storytelling medium with film right at its core that uses social media as a primary way of world building. ARG, Alternate Reality Game. An ARG is a narrative told through social media, websites, and video sharing platforms, which is presented entirely as though it is actually happening. This was originally used for marketing, for example for The Dark Knight and Cloverfield. These early examples mostly consisted of simple websites and videos and were about drumming up buzz about the thing it advertises. This fully transmedia way of storytelling was sure to catch the eye of fledgling filmmakers though, and that it did, with a whole slew of low-budget ARG projects being created during the late 2000s and the early 2010s. But none were more popular than the one that arguably did it first, Marble Hornets, supposedly about a man who finds strange occurrences in old footage of an unfinished short film he tried to make. This not only sparked off modern ARGs, but is also one of the main reasons for the inception of the Slender Man character. We'll talk more about ARGs in just a moment. In the 2010s, VR and AR exploded into popularity. And whilst AR is, in my opinion, absolutely the future of how we interact with both our physical and digital worlds, and AR interfaces will eventually replace the function we use smartphones for now, I'll be focusing on VR for the purposes of this essay, as it's more of a storytelling tool than it is a utility, like AR. In the early years of modern VR, filmmakers tried to use 360-degree cameras to capture real places. But midway through the decade, it became clear that this simply doesn't work well enough for cinematic experiences. In a virtual reality, the viewer always feels the need to explore, to look around, to move around. And this can only be achieved within a digital space. In this scene that I'm going to show you, we'll see a high-tension moment in the game Half-Life, and I'll talk about it once it's done.
That worked?
Yeah. Wow. You okay?
I'm okay. Let's go find Dad.
That's your dad's prisoner pod.
Oh my god. Where's Dad?
Dad? Dad? Dad!
I'm over here, honey. I need help, hurry.
Okay, I'm gonna reach out and pull you up. It's gonna be okay. You ready?
Yeah, I'm good.
Give me your hand.
Alex Vance, I have come to help, as I said I would.
Thank you. Thank you.
The main thing I'm sure you noticed with VR is that, unlike video games before it, and theatrical film before that, there is no point where you can take control of the camera away from the viewer, as their eyes are the camera. They are the camera operator, and so you have to trick them into following your direction in ways I'm sure you can figure out from that scene. For instance, directly asking the player to focus on doing certain things, using bright lights to draw the attention of the viewer, etc. Another example would be the immersive War of the Worlds experience, which was open in 2018 and 2019. This brought you into the world of the story with live actors, VR, and other methods of transmedia storytelling to bring a completely new set of dimensions to an old musical in a truly filmic way. With these three examples, video game cutscenes, ARG storytelling, and virtual reality entertainment, it's time to explore how film as a medium is progressing much faster than our culture has been able to keep up with, and that filmmaking has become the baseline for a new wave of entertainment, and is much more than traditional theatrical film. Now is not the time for innovation. Innovation already happened a decade ago. Now we have to integrate these new standards of filmmaking in the modern age, or separate it entirely. This links back to interactive films like Bandersnatch and ARG storytelling. But ARG storytelling is on a much deeper and more involved level. Take, for instance, the series Tribe 12, about a man stalked by a supernatural entity and its minions, who keeps viewers up to date through social media and video uploads. I spoke with the creator of the series, Adam Rosner, in order to try and shed some light onto why he chose to tell the story in this way. He told me that he wanted to realize the image he saw in his mind, but the monetary and technical limitations pushed him to be more imaginative and resourceful. The phrase, the transcendence of medium, is one that I've touched on in implication so far during this essay. As I've stated through that implication, film is a medium that stands above many others, with its ability to work across different storytelling methods to add depth and reality to those other places, like cutscenes in video games, film segments in one-stage productions, and of course, music video. Film has the ability to cross this line, and, I believe, will be a huge part of pushing entertainment forward into the future. As we have already seen with VR, the language of film can be adapted into any other medium bar, well, books. I would even say that it's already been adapted into these other mediums. But nowhere do I see such drastic evolution as we do in ARG storytelling. Even amongst other transmedia techniques, with ARG storytelling, like with video games, we see additional information about the worlds and characters being created, using other mediums such as social media, with some series, such as Everyman Hybrid, using this additional storytelling as one of the main channels, meaning that it is impossible to understand the whole story of Everyman Hybrid without knowing everything from every channel. In my opinion, this is a weak way of doing ARG storytelling, as it adds a barrier to entry for any new viewers. But if a series creator insists upon it, a much better example would be Cat Ghost, which has extra content as an optional series of extras until the ending, where the ending presented in the web series itself is very sad and underwhelming. Only in the additional content, which are short games, allow the viewers to, upon completion of several challenges, see the true ending of the series. This new wave of independent projects like ARGs is, I believe, the first wave of a new type of transmedia entertainment that can be consumed easily by anyone using channels that people already have access to. And this speaks greatly to my next point. When we talk about creating these new emergent types of media, there's one thing above all that we must keep in mind. In the future, with growing consumer use of virtual reality and the upcoming advent of widespread augmented reality systems, it is easy to see even greater synergy between different mediums of storytelling. Even now, we're seeing products like Google Stadia, bringing high-end gaming to a more general consumer audience, and bringing synergy with, for instance, the ability to watch a game trailer on YouTube, then just click a button in the advert and immediately be transported to playing the game. Or on a more simple level, YouTube recently updating its annotations to provide easy access to linking things on social media, blogs, or other ways of reaching other parts of the story. Truly, transmedia storytelling is the future of creating narratives, and over the next few years, we're going to start seeing more robust versions of these multi-format stories with greater synergy between the platforms that we are already seeing. But at the center of it all can only be the tenets of film, the language created over 100 years ago and evolved over that time to tell visual stories. When I spoke to Adam Rosner, he told me that he thinks that there is incredible untapped potential in VR and AR, and that the next big medium of storytelling will be something no one expects, but that is accessible enough to take off. That last part is important, and leads to my final point before my conclusion. Earlier I asked you to remember when I talked about music video, but there is a big difference between music video and these newer mediums, and that is accessibility. And not only just to those who create the content, but those who consume it. Anyone can make a music video, but who's going to see it without a big publisher backing it? Similarly, until recently, it was impossible to see independent music videos, and even now there is so many arguments about copyright that it would take far, far too long to get into. It's basically a topic for another essay. This problem of accessibility is one of the main problems with emergent media right now. Take, for example, the War of the Worlds immersive experience I talked about earlier. A pretty good transmedia showcase of how different types of tech can be brought together to create a narrative. But with an expensive price tag for both the creators and for the audience, I'd be willing to bet that almost everyone watching this will not have experienced this project in person. Even on a smaller scale, VR famously has quite the barrier to entry. Not only are many VR titles aimed at hardcore gamers, but require a high-spec gaming PC setup on top of the cost of the headset itself. But even now, these things are becoming more accessible. In 2015, the average VR headset cost about £800, often more. But now the industry-leading headsets on a consumer level range between £200 and £400, with an outlier being the Valve Index, which costs about £1,000. But let's ignore that one. Less than half that of modern flagship smartphones. Now, with VR and ARG, these emergent storytelling mediums are accessible to anyone, and the best of both mediums are, in fact, independently made and released. Boneworks and Beat Saber for VR have been called killer apps, and Marble Hornets and Cat Ghost for ARG have garnered huge popularity and started many people's careers who dedicate their time to gathering and exhibiting all relevant information from an ARG's story. This is so important, as it not only creates a greater following and community around a medium, but creates more content within the medium and gives people more of a reason to consume it, as well as giving more people the opportunity to fail so that others can learn from their mistakes in later projects. So, when tackling this move into a new wave of emergent forms of entertainment, it is important to remember the tenets I've talked about here. Creativity, not just in narrative, but in the use of available technology and broadening your perspective outside of what you traditionally perceive as a medium, as the lines between them have been blurred. Immersion, be it through creating a digital reality for viewers to lose themselves in, or creating additional content for viewers to explore or expand what they can get out of the product. And finally, accessibility. Help other creators achieve what you have. Share your skills and make sure anyone can experience your story, no matter who they are and what means they have available. The media landscape over the next decade is going to change in ways no one can expect, and with the wider consumer adoption of VR and the rise of AR taking over many of the functions we currently rely on smartphones for today, brand new opportunities for entertainment will rise up. As we've seen in the early days of AR now, with the incredible technology in Microsoft's HoloLens, to similar experience you can download right now, such as Pokemon Go and Dark. It will be a mix of independent and corporate creators who will push forward these mediums. And film is the centerpiece of them all. There's a reason YouTube is one of the most popular websites on the entire internet. Watching videos on, or even just hosted on YouTube, is now a huge part of most people's daily lives, even if they don't know it. And many subgenres of film have had their inception right there, including the new evolution of video essays like this one you're watching now. All of the ARGs mentioned in this essay have their primary channels on YouTube, and every VR game uses the language of film to create a narrative or gameplay experience unlike anything anyone has ever been able to experience before. In 2008, consultant Peter Drucker said, "Innovation is the specific tool of entrepreneurs, the means by which they exploit change as an opportunity for a different business or service. It is capable of being presented as a discipline, capable of being learned, and capable of being practiced." Film has become an essential part of all of these new mediums that I've talked about today, as writing has to mediums before. And I believe that filmmakers will continue to be the ones who innovate and push forward the future of entertainment. And I can't wait to see it, or maybe even be a part of it. Thank you for watching.